think we're overly overlooking the French-speaking African countries. I think Northern Africa has a lot going on that we don't know much about.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to officially the very first episode of the Borderless Pod. And I'm very excited to be here today because the Borderless Pod is a podcast that aims to highlight those who are building solutions for Africa through the power of on-chain technology. And the idea is for it to serve as a platform to amplify the stories, the solutions, and the challenges of Africa's innovators, connecting them with a global audience like you, who are eager to understand the future of decentralization in one of the world's most dynamic regions. Super excited as well to be able to have Yoseph here with me, who is going to chat to us a bit more about, what Borderless Africa is, what the overall overarching goal is, and how that connects with what I'm trying to do with the Borderless Pod. So, hi, Yosef. How are you doing today?
Hey, Miss Purple. Excited to launch the podcast with you. Doing well.
It's finally happening. Thank you so much for trusting me with this. So just kind of off the bat, I am starting this Borderless Pod, but I think maybe it might be helpful for us to just give like a brief overview of what Borderless Africa is, and then we can get into, what the idea with the podcast itself is and what we're looking into doing in the future.
Amazing. Yeah, super excited that you're driving this, and there's so many amazing stories to tell from within the continent, from outside, and the story is such a powerful tool to inspire us, to help us learn from others' mistakes, to connect us all. So yeah, I'm super pumped about where this can go.
So what exactly is Borderless Africa? I'm sure a few people have probably seen it featured in a few blogs, maybe on Twitter as well, particularly with Magma that just happened. So can you give like a quick brief overview of what it is?
Yeah, totally. And I think the concept behind Borderless is it's a platform with undefined boundaries. And we play with the theme fully in the initiative in itself. It's a public goods initiative, and its mission and purpose is to create an open and permissionless internet that powers Africa's economy and unleash the creative potential of the 900 million plus young Africans. In terms of like what exactly it looks like, think of it as a platform that is basically nurturing the soil on which a lot of beautiful trees and plants and flowers and vegetation can grow. If talent and startups are the different plants in a forest, what Borderless is doing is providing some of the nurturing to the soil and tending to the gardens. And we've over time filled different roles and gaps. It first started by actually just creating the gravitation point of those who want to build using web3 technologies and on-chain infrastructure, Africa's core economic and trust tools that actually serve the markets. And the first thing we did was actually bridging African communities with incredible builders from the rest of the world. We led the trip with Vitalik and the head of the Ethereum Foundation back then, Ayemi Yaguchi, across 4 countries, and just started doing a bunch of meetups, and then brought over a bunch of L2s, including Scroll, Arbitrum, ETH Global, a bunch of core devs, including our friends from Base and Optimism. And we organized Ethereum Frontiers Africa, which was a gathering of a lot of builders from 12 African countries and about 100 of the Ethereum core developers. So that's kind of been one role that we played in bridging a lot of builders and community leaders across Africa with the rest of the world, just so that we remove that physical and social graph disconnect between the two worlds. And last year, we launched Magma, which is a founder program, creating the coordination point for those who are building the tools and applications for the African market. They can be from Africa, they can be from anywhere in the world, but they got to focus on the African continent and user base and building on-chain or moving on-chain so that we can actually come together, be in person, coordinate, learn from each other, support each other, and use the full capacity of decentralized tools to build the tools and applications that can actually meet the needs of the African user base. Subsequent to Magma, we launched Lava, which is a fund that is there to actually drive capital to early stage African startups And the reason why we did that is because there's a lot of capital around the world that wants to be deployed in highly effective startups. And there's a lot of folks who are curious about what's happening in Africa, but they don't really understand the market and ecosystem. And there's a lot of amazing founder talent across Africa that is not accessing capital that is available globally. And so Lava's building sort of that bridge to channel capital, bring more co-investors, and really back some of the highest potential startups in the market. And now we're launching this podcast, which is a beautiful initiative focused around storytelling. And like, if we look ahead into the future, we can hopefully see multiple other types of initiatives that others use the Borderless platform to launch, just so that we keep filling the gaps that exist in tending the garden and support the ecosystem, so that we take full ownership of the internet and we take ownership of the web3 movement.
I'm snapping my fingers. I think it's very exciting. Also I'm picking up a lot of earthy metaphors with being a garden, but also with magma and now with lava. And I think I was particularly drawn to those because it felt like it's symbolizing the fact that there is endless potential, but the potential is only what it is because we know that there is something to be found within there. Magma is kind of it's just magma if it doesn't have the potential of becoming more. And I think that's what we've seen. The previous has been 3 cohorts now. You launched last year, but we just recently had Magma 3 now in April, like March, April. And it was great, like personally, for me to be able to physically experience that. And I think that has also kind of pushed following through with this podcast to kind of say there are so many rich stories. There's so many builders from different, ways of life working on solving different solutions, but also from different regions solving the same thing. So that means that there needs to be, a connectivity. One of the major topics that was had during this particular magma was the fragmentation and how that needs to be reduced. And something that could seem simple, like storytelling or a podcast or a blog, things like that are very important because they add a voice, they add more visibility to what it is that is being done on the ground. And I love that you were mentioning that with Borderless Africa, it becomes what it needs to become. And it kind of just evolves with what the founders need, what the landscape needs, what Africa needs. It's not kind of you just locked into being the same thing 24/7 because that's not what growth looks like, right? So I'm extremely honored to be able to do this. There's the plan here, or the idea here, is to offer that space for builders to talk us through what it is that they're building, but also their personal experience getting to that building journey. And obviously the elements of putting this thing together. The space is ever growing, and I know there's a ton of issues and there are a ton of pain points that people experience, but I think there are also lessons that we can share with each other because we want to improve, and we know that this continent is growing at a very, very quick pace. And the only thing we can do is make sure we capacitate as many people as we can, that we continue moving forward and not be as dependent as we have come to be for the most part in terms of, external influence and external support. It needs to start from home, like first and foremost. So yeah, I'm just very excited to see what's possible beyond just them operating within their regional silos or maybe even their thought process silo, right? We can also spark different conversations, different innovators, that competition that we've been talking about as well, where it's not really competition between each other, but it's how can we work together to make the most of what the other person is able to provide and bring to the space.
Totally. I mean, my biggest privilege in all the work that I do is actually the endless source of inspiration that exists across the whole continent and the talent base, from the self-taught developers, security experts, builders who are building from the ground up and are just achieving incredible feats on the global stage. The founders who are building functions of what a bank would normally do at like 20 something years of age and winning in that landscape to the point where banks are actually their customers. That's just incredible. Like, that would never happen in other times in human history, except this period in time. But also like amazing community builders and ecosystem developers who are actually doing the groundwork, unseen work mostly, in actually elevating talent, growing communities, creating educational platforms. So yeah, I really hope this podcast can be a megaphone for those who are doing the work that matters, shedding light on their life stories and on their work. And also just cross-pollinating. I think we're still heavily fragmented. I think so much is happening in weaving and connecting a huge part of the communities, but there's so much more out there. And so the more we can do that, I think the healthier for a landscape that we can have.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I would be curious to know what the word borderless to you, like as a word, what does that mean? What does it imply? What does borderlessness look like? And what does it look like when borderless Africa itself is successful? Have things drastically changed, or what is the goal there?
So I actually dig into my own life growing up in Ethiopia, and I've been a product of the internet in terms of learned a bunch in school and through people, but what I had available and accessible was always limited based on the relationships our families had, based on who you basically had access to and who's available in one country in Ethiopia. And the crazy thing is, for most of my life and most of many young people's life across Africa, being born in Africa and being from there continues to be a liability. And that just sucks, right? That's like the lottery that no one really chose. And as a result of that, your entire like level of contribution and your potential ends up being limited just based on the country you were born into. And as a result of that, you have this brain drain of a lot of people trying to move somewhere else, which, is not necessarily a bad thing. And I had to do that myself, and actually growing up in Ethiopia, when I was young, the best building was the airport and the best road was the road to the airport. And
It's a metaphor.
every little shop in every corner would sell a diversity visa form, chewing gum, and cigarettes because everyone just wanted to go away. Like landing on the internet and accessing all the information that's available and growing a lot through it and from it and getting global opportunities as a result of that has just showed me that talent is borderless and knowledge and information is borderless. The whole name and premise behind it is that we are part of a global family. We are deeply interconnected with each other across Africa, between Africa and the rest of the world, and everywhere. And in this time of hyperconnectivity that we have, it just feels so silly that as individuals, our growth potential and our capacity to contribute is limited by location. And secondly, that our economic activities are still held way, 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 way back because of all the friction points that exist when we're doing things between borders or when we're sharing information across borders, or because you're in the wrong place, you're not able to create part of your economy. You have to use what someone else has created for you, right? And the open source movement has been a very critical element to actually facilitate ownership of creation on the internet and sharing of that. Cryptography and blockchains have made it much more possible for people to own part of the internet from wherever you are and contribute to it. So the crypto narrative to me is not just like an alternative asset class to invest or tokenization of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It is really the capacity for anyone from anywhere to be part of building their own economy, their own contributions to their society, and globally and locally as well. And so, the mission and vision behind Borderless is help weave the talent base, the opportunities, the projects, the tools, the communities, so that we can create the economic infrastructures that we actually want and that we deserve. And as an initiative, as I mentioned earlier, like it's undefined. It is borderless. So it is a platform with a bunch of different types of initiatives meeting the needs of their time. And I see it as a platform that others can use for different parts of their missions as well. And I think it'll be exciting to find ways of collaborating with a bunch of others. And what would success look like of our mission is just for us not to exist as a group and as an entity. And what that means is just that there's so much nurtured soil across the whole ecosystem that projects and communities are just popping like there's no tomorrow, and creating the tools that are actually purpose fit for the user base that those builders are targeting across Africa and beyond. So we want to have a lot of founders, we want to have a lot of builders, we want to have a lot of researchers, a lot of communities, not for the sake of having a lot, but for the sake of actually building what people need and want. And the bigger thesis around that is that the next 10, 20, 30 years of Africa's journey is not going to be one where one or two companies are going to come and solve everyone's problems with a magic wand, or the next version of money and finance across Africa is not, to me, not just dollarizing the whole continent, or having a Standard Chartered version of an on-chain economy come and just build the Alipay and WeChat of Africa. That just does not make sense from a values perspective. It's just from an execution perspective, right? Good luck trying to build something that fits and works for 2,000 language speakers, 54 countries, and 1.5 billion people. It's going to take a lot of time, and we don't have time. So the best way for us to build and move in that direction is to actually leverage the full capacity of decentralization. So the Borderless initiative is there to help feed the soil so that multiple flowers and plants can bloom.
The analogy that I like to use is to become a mycelium network, right? And I think
I like that.
yeah, it's like a great way of kind of just saying everyone can exist on their own, yes. However, what happens when you connect to a larger collective of builders and creators and, people or nodes within this network, you end up with this lively being that, exists within and without itself, where everyone can
Right.
kind of tap into each other and you're collectively building, even though you may feel like, oh, I'm just focusing on my little thing. Your corner is very valuable because it kind of feeds into the grander scheme of the network itself and what everybody else is able to achieve. So I think it also creates like an inherent desire to support each other, because I want you to do better, because then so can I. And, we're kind of able to grow with each other instead of against each other. And I think as well, like for me in particular, probably also, from my personal story, where I've just kind of always been, okay, there has to be more than my country of Lesotho. Beautiful country. However, we're very, very small. So it's about like 2.3 million people, which is like the size of a village for a lot of other people. So I think the desire for me was that borderlessness, right? To kind of feel like I don't just exist within this small piece of land across an entire continent, but we're all connected with each other. And that's something that I've always been, very particular about, kind of figuring out ways. I didn't know what it was called before I came across the word decentralization. I just knew that I want to understand how we as young people are finding our space within, the arena of the future and with this new internet as well.
Actually, I'm curious to hear in terms of how you landed to put more of your energy in the storytelling. And
Yeah.
even in the last number of years you've been doing that, what are the types of impact you've seen in your work and also in various communities across the continent?
So I guess I started off, as most people kind of do, with poetry, more so just kind of maybe revolutionary poetry. Grew up, kind of reading those kinds of books that felt like, okay, there's got to be more to this world and to this continent than what we're able to see. So got into radio, and I did about 5-6 years of radio. And that's where I started getting into current affairs and understanding the impact and the reach you're able to get just from telling a story. So just kind of sharing just something as basic as what has happened in the news today, what has happened in the Pan-African economic ecosystem, what is going on there? How do you make people aware here in Lesotho that this is something that's happening? So I did a stint in that, and then I kind of, COVID happens, and I still wanted to continue telling these stories, but radio didn't seem to quite cut it anymore. And I started my own podcast, and it was essentially just me just having raw conversations with people from everywhere. And the concept or the idea behind that was genuinely, we cannot be so separate from each other, because most of our stories are so similar, and it makes no sense for us to be removed from each other in that way. And the biggest impact I was able to see from that was I got invited to have conversations with people of, I can say, maybe higher influence, because they wanted to know what information I can give them, because I've been able to gather that information and bring it together. And they want to know, okay, how can you help us get more of this type of information? We're curious to know what you think, because you've had so many. So maybe, your thought process might be a bit different. And through things like that, it's just you're seeing more people understanding. So I'm seeing a lot more conversations just kind of happening in general, with people wanting to connect a bit more and be a bit more global. So my understanding is just always try to make information as global as possible, because like how you said, information should be and is borderless in its essence, right? The idea is for it to disseminate as quickly as possible, and for a person who receives that to be able to use that information to evolve or teach or just know a lot more than they did before they had that information. So yeah, it was born out of me being curious, coming from like a physics background. I just wanted to know stuff, and I thought, if I want to know stuff, I'm sure there are plenty of people who want to know stuff too. So it's just sharing my learnings with everyone else and kind of taking them on the journey of me discovering the rest of the world.
Amazing, amazing. So I hope we're going to hear some of your poetry sometime in the future.
Oh, maybe I can be persuaded. Maybe it feels like a retelling of the state of where we are as a people. Yeah, so maybe someday I'll bring my poetry to the pod, or bring it on chain or something like that. We'll see.
I think that'll be fun. Poetry is so powerful. Poetry is such a
Yeah, and
powerful tool.
I'm surprised we haven't
Yeah.
seen a lot more of it. But I think also outside of it just being poetry, I think we definitely need a lot more mediums of storytelling, because podcasting is only one avenue, right? And I would be very interested to see more NFTs that tell these stories, that capture, the essence, because the continent is huge. There are 54 countries, 2,000 languages. I cannot speak 2,000 languages. I don't think anybody should speak 2,000 languages. That just makes no sense. But I think we should have a lot more different voices that are, facilitating these conversations, whether it's through podcasting, through blogs, through artistry, through poetry, dance, whatever, all different, mediums. I think we need to experiment more and tap a lot more into our nature of storytelling and immortalizing things in our stories and who we are and our progress as well, because it is so important for us to be able to draw inspiration from the past. So it only makes sense for us to make sure that there is a past for our future to draw inspiration from. Outside of just this podcast, what other things are you hoping to see builders of different mediums? Obviously, not just technical, not just researchers. What are we hoping to kind of get out of the borderless movement as a whole? Because it encompasses, I believe, every industry that we can possibly have as a continent.
I am very, very bullish on the African market, and not just from identity or, just wanting to serve an unserved part of the population. It's actually a very, very clear opportunity to build the next layer of economic tools, financial tools, and trust tools that have the capacity to define century plus future of the African continent. First and foremost, we're growing so fast as a population and people, and I see tremendous room for new types of technology enabled tools to fill the gaps that exist in the market, because what we're doing with web3 is not necessarily trying to perform banks or traditional institutions or trying to compete with them, but actually filling gaps that they have left at scale and doing what institutions are not set up or able to do right now. And in doing so, we're laying the foundation for how money moves across the continent, how value is created, how trust is established and leveraged, how talent is expressed, and what types of economic activities that did not exist before are now able to exist from scratch. And to me, this whole space is new land creation, new opportunity creation. We saw a version of this with the rise of the internet and the rise of mobile technology, where we basically had the combination of mobile phones and also internet adoption across the continent aligned with mobile banking. And the three kind of worked really well together, where mobile banking just grew so fast and so much across Africa. And now they're doing $1 trillion of transaction. Imagine even, where we spend a bunch of time with Magma in Kenya, how many economic activities have been unlocked as a result of M-Pesa and other mobile money initiatives. And different ways of that has really permeated across the entire economy, society. And this is just in about 2 decades. And it's using very antiquated, simple USSD technology, right? We've been able to do so much with very little in that phase there. And that's by aligning with new trends and new developments in technology. And at that point, it was the combination of mobile phones and some internet penetration, and more internet penetration has enabled it. And now we have a lot of decentralized tools and blockchains being built. Internet penetration is deepening across the whole continent, and the youth population is also increasing at a rate that we've never seen before. And I think with all these different things combined, the types of things that we are able to create right now are just incredible. We're able to create functions of a bank. We're able to create versions of like identity verification and trust infrastructures. We're able to transact and add value as talent with the rest of the world with just using our anonymous or pseudonymous names, because we're able to build a track record of a lot of our activities. We're able to increase value of the things we're producing locally in traditional economies. And these are just the little breadcrumbs that we see right in front of us, right? And so I think with what we're able to create right now, I think we can even move faster as entrepreneurs in integrating the African economy a lot faster than what governments and traditional institutions are able to do, because of the tools that we have available to us and because of what we're able to build, but because we're also able to coordinate a lot faster and better with each other. So what I love to see, just as a private citizen, is just more of that, more of these tools to connect us and really unblock a lot more economic value and potential across the African continent. And on the other side, we're seeing these tools being used for heavier localization. You talked about sort of our ancient stories and narratives that we have. We have many practices across the whole continent that rely on local trust structures. We've got these savings groups. We have like the chamas and table banking. And these exist across all of Africa. It's not just in multiple countries. With our friends with grassroots economics, they're experimenting with incredible ways of doing commitment pooling and helping people leverage existing trust structures. So we're able to go hyper localized, and we're able to also get hyper localized and hyper globalized at the same time. And I think that's just like, it's so powerful. I don't know when something like this was possible. So I get very excited when thinking about what is possible. But the thing is, these things are really challenging to build, and they are very contextual based. And so you're not going to have someone from San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, Shanghai, or Singapore being set up to be successful at building this. It's got to be people who understand the mechanics of these landscapes, these economies, these trust structures, these languages and cultures. And so it is a time for many builders to rise. It is a time for many founders to rise. And it is one of those places where the cost of starting is very, very low. It's been the lowest that it's ever been. Using off-the-shelf tools, jumping into groups and getting feedback from others. Programs like ours, but there's so many other programs around the continent. I think it's a very exciting time to be a builder. Very challenging, regardless of what you work on, but possible. And I don't know how many times it was possible at this scale in the past.
I love that. There was a question that was asked during the last 2 days of Magma. In particular, it was the minicon. And the question was, what is the vision of Africa that we can achieve within the next 5 to 10 years? And that was a very popular question. And I think it's because people essentially get to put to words what they have in their hearts and what they would like to see happen. And then you get to see people go, I can solve for that. And that is phenomenal. It's the most beautiful feeling and the space to be in as well, because you're seeing a literal, progress towards that vision coming to life. And my response to that vision is to say, a lot more access, right? So in the way that Borderless Africa is doing, access to information, access to networks, but beyond just Borderless Africa, just access to each other, right? And to different opportunities as well. There are other, different initiatives, other programs that are facilitating that exact vision and executing that. So I think in general, all of us just kind of need to, figure out just that thing that helps us to just work together a whole lot more. All our visions in their different formats and whatever angle it is that they're facing, they don't make sense together. As people, as human beings, we can only truly see like one portion of the end goal and of this vision, and that's why the collective vision is even more important, because then you can have people, kind of operating in that decentralized manner where it doesn't require that we only focus on one thing all at one go, and seeing the level of progress that we're able to see. Because when you think the fact that Magma, for instance, as a singular program already has 75 founders and builders, that's 75 people who are working on different items or different versions of this vision, different executions, different avenues, different industries. And that's just not even, that's barely a percentage of the continent, like at all. So there's still so many people out there, still so many projects. And I am very interested and very curious and very excited to see what it is that we're able to kind of achieve within the next 5 years. Obviously the macro right now is in shambles in many, many ways. I think the only way it can get better is for us to actually do the work that needs to be done, right? We've come to a point now where it's no longer just kind of waiting for somebody else to bring the solution. It's now doing the actual building yourself and, facilitating each other as builders within the continent who understand and have the same or similar concept and context as well of the way things are on the ground, because you can't just kind of just build a thing and then think it's just going to work. You need to understand what the people need. You need to solve a thing that actually makes sense for them, that needs solving. So my question to you is maybe an example that you can give in terms of regional growth and development. Is there, a specific group or a country or a region that you're seeing right now that is actively making positive progress across the continent that we can maybe kind of look at, take some learnings from? I know obviously Kenya is doing some progress with their regulation and legislation, but I also know that Nigeria has a lot of builders that are actively kind of coming together and building different types of solutions. We've also seen a lot more people in different regions as well, obviously South Africa and Uganda and all of these other countries. But are there specific regions perhaps that you feel are making a lot more progress that we can maybe tap into, learn from each other, just kind of create this mycelium network that is more productive beyond our borders?
I think you mentioned the usual suspects, all of them. And I continue to be very excited of what's happening in Nigeria, especially with the talent base. Last year, there was almost 1 million people who contributed to open source software on GitHub alone from Nigeria. So there's just incredible talent. Like, I've never been in a room bigger than 2,000 Nigerians who are nerding out on technology, right? Imagine 1 million. I don't know where they are. I don't know how far they're spread, but they got the numbers, right? But I got to also tell you that all of us who move around and navigate around the English speaking sides of Africa, I think we're overly overlooking the French speaking African countries. I think Northern Africa has a lot going on that we don't know much about. So I want us to build more bridges with a number of these regions and be able to connect with the talent base there and reach out to folks. So yeah, it would be really cool to do this podcast in French or in Arabic or other languages at some point. No pressure. I know you speak 7 languages, but yeah, I don't know, French and Arabic not there. But I think it'd be really, really cool to weave more connections between a bunch of those regions. So we're not remaining, at least in a lot of the Web3 work, just focusing on the English speaking side of the African continent.
There are people who speak Kiswahili. There's quite a few of them. Africa alone, for instance, has 11 official languages, and that's a small number in comparison to what other countries have. So it would definitely be very, very interesting to see what experimenting with different languages, different regional material could mean, what we could be able to see in terms of builder perspective. And my challenge to you is for the next Magma,
Right.
I would like to see a few of these different, countries and these different regions. I'm not sure how we can make that possible, but I think it would be great to get perspective, get like literal builder experience, because I think, we can only do so much. But understanding what a builder from, French speaking country or from a Swahili speaking country or just not speaking English at all, what their experience with the space is and what they need to make sure that a lot more of them are able to interact and build beyond, the English language. And I think a lot more people are also being aware of this, because a lot of us, if we speak English on the continent, it means you speak at least two languages minimum, right? For the most part. So I think just understanding that nuance and that culture is important in whatever it is that you're creating and building. Because, WhatsApp, for instance, means something completely different to
Totally.
us than it does to other people in another region. In the same way that WeChat for a lot of Asia, or particularly China, is a really big deal, right? So you have to have cultural nuance and context for you to be able to build solutions that will actually drive forward momentum. So yeah, it would be very, very exciting to see some builders from these different countries.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, we would love to have more builders from those regions, and we'll work harder to reach out to folks. And yeah, if you're listening, you're a founder and a builder from anywhere in the continent, but also especially Central Africa and other French-speaking countries, would love to have you over, as well as from the northern side of our brothers and sisters. I actually have a question for you, Miss Purple. What are the types of conversations you want to have? What gets you excited when you think about the future of this podcast and the types of folks you want to have over?
So I'd be very curious to kind of understand the origin of them being developers, them becoming problem solvers and innovators, but also just understanding the thing that kind of also brought them to this decentralized space, right? Being on chain is a completely different mindset as well, from just kind of facilitating just any kind of, solution. But the desire to use this particular type of technology, that is a story in itself. And I think that needs to be told, and maybe just to kind of share, the process of doing that building. While being at Magma in particular, I got to hear snippets again. And I'm like, whoa, hang on. This is insane, because these people, some of them don't even know each other. But a lot of them got there and said, hey, I want to work with you because you have the same kind of understanding and the same context and the same desire that I do. I want to know where that common ground, where it comes from. Is it just from different experiences? Is it from kind of us moving within the same region? If it is, how can we package that commonality, that common thread that we all seem to have, and make sure that everyone is able to feel it and have the same, drive to move progressively together as a collective. So it's both personal questions, but also from a technical standpoint, to understand how this technology is being used within their problem solving and their projects. And I think then from there, you're able to kind of get a grander vision of, continentally speaking and globally speaking, what are you playing in that global game? Because unfortunately, it is a game, right? And I want to know how they're seeing themselves positioning within the grander scheme of things. And I'd like to kind of just dive into rabbit holes and make other people curious as well, to figure out, if this person thinks this way, then you understand a bit more about why their project functions the way it functions, right? And from there, I think it will also be great for us to then see, after that conversation, do they change anything? Does anything evolve from there? Do outside users, do they get more curious about understanding a lot more about the people? Because I always think the technology is phenomenal, it's fantastic, but it's brought about by the people for people. So I want to know a bit more just about the people behind, the projects that we're seeing, but also about the technical standpoint of how exactly we're all just deciding to be on chain and transparent. And a lot more people are being open source, which I didn't grow up that being a thing where people said, I want to be open source. Everyone's just kind of had this mindset that, no, my thing is my thing. But now we seem to have like a collective building mindset, which I absolutely love. So I just want to tap into that a bit more, just learn a bit more about people.
Yeah, I'm super pumped to hear the personal stories. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a mountain of incredibly inspiring stories across the continent that we have.
Mhm.
And if we can help share some of it, for just selfishly for our own inspiration, but also for folks to learn and understand where people are, because I keep getting surprised how many folks learn everything online by themselves, don't show up to any in-person events, if there are any. And this is sort of in the big cities. Like imagine all the folks who are not in the big cities, but products of the internet, learning everything online. And so I'm excited to be able to reach those folks and for us to be able to hopefully create value to those folks. And from my angle, like I'm really interested in having real talk, the real talk of the journey of building, the journey of creating, the journey of failing, the journey of getting up, back up, and trying other things. Would love to see more demos of products and initiatives of what people are actually creating and the mechanics of how they work. I would love to make it easier for our global friends to understand the types of problems people are solving here on the continent. It's so funny, like globally, many people talk about things 6 months to 2 years later after they've been affecting Africa, specifically around usability, specifically around like removing complexity for the user, not just from a technical research, but actually how to reach real people. And, one of Magma folks reposted a tweet from our friends at Circle who wrote like, for the first time we have cross-border payments and in a few seconds. Like, I think the Magma guy was like, no, bro, we've been doing this for a long time. You're just doing it yourself right now. Which to me, it's like we're so far ahead on a number of things in terms of making these tools actually usable for the real person that I think it would be super valuable for the rest of the world to really see what's happening. Yeah, I think those are some of the goals that I have. I think it would be also amazing to hear from a number of the key community builders across the continent, those who are running events, education programs, and nurturing the soil from the ground up. We don't hear those voices much in the space, and their just depth of wisdom and knowledge and actual work in terms of what it takes to build a community from the bottom up. Because there's a lot of that energy that wants to be manifested across the continent. And I think hearing from those who've been doing that for years would be super valuable.
The goal is to be a vehicle, of those different types of conversations in their different formats and their different structures, whether it's demos or just, straight podcasts, or even like a group session where we have, open table discussions with a bunch of, opinion leaders or builders. But I think at the end of the day, we just want to hear from people what it is that, what are we doing? What are we building towards? How can we, be more cohesive with each other? And I'm excited to see the evolution of the podcast, obviously, because you and I can only come up with these ideas now. And who knows, maybe 6 months from now, it can look completely different in a way that neither one of us can expect. And that's what we're hoping for, for it to kind of grow beyond what we are able to think of right now, because there are so many of us. And I think we were definitely going to see a lot more connectivity with each other. And that's what I'm most excited to be able to facilitate with the podcast. So I hope this summarizes, in general, what we're aiming to achieve, what I'm hoping to be able to facilitate with all of you and with all your support and every single builder, every community member out there. Feel free to reach out any point, whether we have a podcast or we write an interview blog post. But I'm just super, super excited to be able to do this. So thank you to Yoseph. Thank you to Borderless Africa. Thank you to every Magma builder. And thank you to every single African builder who's building and putting together solutions, because you inspire me. You inspire a whole bunch of people out there. You inspire, I think, a lot of people who are watching and listening to this. And I think you actually inspire a lot more of a global audience than you are aware of. So kudos to you. And I hope to be able to continue telling your story. I think with that, we will end the episode here. I don't know if you have any final words, Yoseph, just to close off.
No, I just want to say thank you for jumping in and wanting to drive this. I think this is going to be super exciting. And as you said, we don't know in what directions it'll evolve, but we've got to start somewhere. And here we are at point zero.
Builders have a hard time kind of stepping outside of, the bubble of creating and building. And I just want to be able to share everything that all of you are doing. So hopefully you can see a lot more of those both on our Twitter forecaster and our blog and here on the podcast. So from myself, Miss Purple, and from Yoseph and from the Borderless Africa team, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next episode.